All
We'll
right.
give another minute to see if anybody's coming in a minute or two late, but for those of you that are here, thank you so much. Grab your lunch, grab a bite, and we'll get started in just a minute.
I think if you want to go ahead and go, I'll just keep an eye on the waiting room and they can
Perfect.
pop in whenever you're ready. So,
All right. So, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Megan. We are diving into how to lay out your marketing campaign. So today is not going to necessarily be a how-to in the steps of the individual tasks that are within a marketing campaign, but more so the, as it says, laying out portion of it, planning what you're going to be doing ahead of time and when you're going to be doing it. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. With me today is our Confluence team. So again, my name is Megan. I am based out of Buffalo, New York. Lynette is our founder and CEO, and Melanie is one of my coworkers. All of us here at Confluence are arts marketing nerds and just wanting to make sure that all of the information we have is passed on to all of you. Lynette and Melanie will be watching our chat today, so please feel free if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, comments, exciting revelations, feel free to send them in the chat and they'll pop in if we want to talk about that at all. Also, feel free to unmute yourself and throw out any questions if you have them throughout the presentation. I would love for this to be a conversation rather than me just lecture you for the next 30 minutes. So, before we decide what our marketing campaign is going to be, we need to decide what are you marketing. If anybody is willing to unmute themselves and tell me like what your work is, what kind of campaigns you might be setting up, if you want to throw it in the chat, and if we're all enjoying our lunch and not necessarily ready to interact in the first 2 minutes of this presentation, this is also a bigger question of what is it that you're trying to communicate to people, and who are those people that you're trying to communicate with?
I think everybody's eating.
That's totally fair. Figure we give a chance to meet anybody if they want to interact, but I will move it on for sure. So, oh, everybody's faces are in the way of my thing. Hmm. Oh, Zoom. So once you know what you are going to be marketing, you've started to think about what you are communicating and who you're going to be communicating to. It's the question of how are you going to communicate it? What are those forms of communication? And when and how often do you do that? The big overarching answer to that you can kind of take away as the big point is as much as consistently as achievable for you. That does not mean that you have to match any of the recommendations that we will give here today because they might be unattainable with the workload that you currently are juggling. So take these as our recommendations and think about how you can make them achievable for yourself. The key when I'm thinking about a marketing campaign that I always want to address is that this is so much more than just your paid advertisements. A lot of the times when we use the word marketing, people think of our paid television commercials from very large businesses. And of course, that is a part of a marketing campaign, but there is so much else that we can be doing in-house for free with our team or for cheaper than always just paid advertising. So there's so much more that goes into the communications of a marketing campaign. And that is what we have bullet pointed here. So, depending on what your work is, if you are a performing arts organization with a season, if you have a series release of your work, or depending on what your work is, just the general announcement that it is happening. The key here would be as early as possible, and that really depends on what your work is. For a majority of our clients that are performing arts organizations, we would love for this to be 6 months, 8 months, a year in advance, kind of however it flows with your workload, but giving yourself as long of a runway as possible with as early as possible. Emails and organic posts are great because they are things that you own for free. They are communications that you have already grabbed people with. You have their contact information. They have chosen to subscribe to your email list or follow your social media platforms. And so here it's again about consistency. I could recommend you post once a week or email once a week. I could recommend you email twice a week or post every single day. Again, it's about what you can do consistently. Digital ads is where we start to talk about something that you can pay for to start to reach new audiences. When it comes to the budgets that we see most of the time, we recommend advertising and starting your digital advertising 8 weeks before you open your event, your show, you launch your new work. Traditional ads is a little bit of a tricky question. They are 100% part of your marketing campaign, but we don't always recommend that they are part of your marketing campaign just because of budget. This is a way bigger conversation. I could spend a full half hour talking about the balance of digital advertising versus traditional advertising. But when it comes to the limited budgets that we tend to see in arts and nonprofit organizations, prioritizing digital advertising with your budget over traditional is why I have there that this is a decision to be based on your budget. Your website is also part of your marketing campaign. You want to make sure that it is updated as often as possible with as much of the information as you think is entertaining and exciting and necessary for your audiences to make those informed decisions and hopefully buy tickets, purchase your work, interact with your work. Press releases is something that you want to plan ahead of time as well. Sometimes press releases are things that we forget about until the show is open and we go, oh my gosh, how great would this have been to be out in the world in other places? Make sure that this is part of your plan in advance. And then earned media is not necessarily something you can plan for. This would be somebody choosing to pick up the story about your work. This would be audience members and people that have interacted with you sharing their experience with your work on social media. But again, this is part of your marketing campaign that you can have a plan for as you're looking ahead at what is to come. So before I break this down into more of a slightly overwhelming calendar, but I promise it'll be something you might want to reference in the future once we get through it. Let's start with like these big blocks of what that calendar truly is communicating. So you're starting with the broad plan and your long lead time, giving yourself as much breath to work in as possible, and with that broad plan of all of those elements, plus or minus anything else that's part of your marketing campaign. Then you break it down into specifically planned items. So you know you're going to have email as part of your marketing campaign, but you can specifically plan the emails when they're going to go out and what that messaging might be. So actually breaking it down so you know exactly what you're doing and when. Once those steps are in place, you are starting by communicating with your existing audiences. So don't spend the money right up front necessarily. This is a way to communicate with the people you already have connected with your organization. So your emails, your organic posts, your website. Then, as it gets closer to the event, you pay to expand your reach and to start to find new audiences. So, this is when you work in digital advertising and maybe PR and things that will broaden the net to people who are a little bit more open to new experiences that weekend or that month. People who might not be bought in yet, but you're able to convince kind of in that last second. So, this is the start of the big, potentially busy calendar by the end of this, once I add in a couple more details on here. But this is the timing breakdown of those bigger buckets that I just talked about. So, starting at about 12 months out, and remember, this timeline can flux based on what your workflow is, but this is just something that we tend to recommend, and then you can adjust it based on the timing that you need and the availability of this type of work and information for you. So we would love to see everybody working on their stuff a full 12 months out from when a release or a launch or an opening happens. This is when you start figuring out those logistics. You're figuring out what dates are we doing these things? Do we have the rights? Do we have the collaborators, the artists? You start really figuring out that this is what is going to happen. And then, of course, that takes some time. So within about the next 4 months, these details start to get locked down. You start to know what your next year is going to look like. And then you start brainstorming. And this is where like the marketing part of it comes in. We want you to start brainstorming who are the audiences that you're going to be communicating to? What are the messages you want to tell them? What is the content that you are going to be using to communicate those messages? And then also planning your discounts in advance. Again, this is something that our team and especially Mel could do a whole half hour on, but making sure that pricing strategies, discounts, and the sales part that is part of your marketing is also brainstormed and planned out far in advance, not done last minute. Um, I will say any of these little notes that I have on here is definitely not all inclusive, but I would say some of the more key points that we want you to be thinking about at these milestones. Then, roughly 6 months out, we have the announcement. This might not be a full season announcement. This is, if we're thinking about one specific event, this is when the communication really starts to pick up that is specific for this one event that we see coming up in roughly 6 months. So this is when your subscribers, your members, your bought-in audiences start to receive the organic communications, websites, emails, posts, posts being on social media, any of the different platforms that you're on. This is the introduction. People start to know, okay, this is coming up, and this starts the decision-making process for people. From this key point out, I will say we are seeing in arts industry and just around the country in general, what we're trying to fight against is audiences are buying super last minute. It used to be that people are buying tickets to events the week of the event. It's starting to become the day of the event, the hours before the event. But the decision-making process can start as early as when they first hear about an event and say, this is something I want to spend my time and money on. So spreading out as much communication as you can for them to make that decision is very important. But it doesn't have to ramp up right away. This doesn't mean that at 6 months out, we start talking to them every single day about this event. Because at 4 months out, we would recommend you're starting to really plan these things out in more detail. You're creating the content in advance. You are starting your PR pitches. You are writing blogs. If you have a blog section on your website, that is a great way to drive information and interaction with your website. So this is when you're starting to really prep the more in-depth communications and the more frequent communications that are coming up as we get closer to an event. And then at the 3 month mark out from this an event, obviously a lot of stuff is going on at your organization or within your work all at the same time. So these timelines are overlapping with other timelines for a lot of different things happening within your work. But at about that 3 month mark from an event, things start to ramp up for this specific event, of course, getting balanced with all the other messages that you have going out at the same time. At the 2 month mark, you start to expand with your paid reaches. So at that 3 month mark, the communication is ramping up to your existing audiences. At that 2 month mark, which is our 8 week point out from a event, this is when we start our paid advertising. So this is when you start to reach new audiences with the PR, the blogs are ramping up, things are becoming more frequent. And as I talk about frequent, I will get onto that in, I think, the next slide. Um, and we are paying to reach new audiences. We are starting to make those decisions more frequent for people to choose to come. 1 month out, you start to really focus into this. If you have an agenda, let's say, for things that are coming up, this starts to become the top of the agenda because, again, you're balancing this communication with a lot of other stuff going on with your work, at your organization, different departments. But at that 1 month mark, your marketing starts to focus on this upcoming event. Things are ramping up, and you will see that in the numbers on the next slide for sure. And then, congratulations, you have made it to the event, but as you can tell, this is not the end of the timeline. While the event is going on, let yourself enjoy the success, but make sure that the marketing is still continuing. If you are getting reviews, if you are getting testimonials, if people are sharing their experience, how can you humble brag, or not even humble brag, just brag about your successes that are happening at your event? If this is a one-night event, then this is something that is happening like in the moment and might not necessarily be able to sell more. If this is a run of a show that lasts for 4 or 5 weeks, this is super important because you're building on word of mouth and you're creating the experience that people get to have and helping drive that decision more. And then once the final curtain closes or the last sale was made and everything is wrapped up for this event, you're still not done. I'm so sorry, but we want you to follow up. This is a really key point that just because the curtain has closed does not mean that the work and the marketing campaign for this specific event is over, because we want to make sure that the happy audience members that you had come back in the future. So make sure that you are sharing their successes, thanking them for coming, and then inviting them to come back. Especially if you were able to isolate who was a brand new audience member, a brand new interaction for your work or your organization, that is somebody you want to specifically invite back. And again, back to our 8 months ago brainstorming, this might include a discount that we planned on inviting somebody back with. So all of this really cyclically cycles back to itself. Double words, but yes. So obviously, this is a whole lot. Within all of those steps, I was talking about how frequently things are being shared and how the amount of communications will ramp up. This is an example. This is an ideal timeline that we shoot for with honestly some of our bigger clients, and it's still a challenge. This is something that we would recommend, but is probably not always realistic right away for everybody and their staff, their time, their efforts. So, this is something that we try to shoot for. The key here being that once you add up all of these organic posts, it's actually 40 pieces of content for one show. That is a lot. I am not going to lie to you. Like, I know that that is a very big number, but the overarching idea of what is in front of you right now is that it ramps up as you get closer to the event. So don't think that doing one post a week from 6 months out to the week of the show is going to be quote unquote enough. But again, do it with what you can do consistently. Our recommendation here is that these 8 and 7 months out, like on our timeline, are for conceptualizing and starting to create content. At that 6 months out, the communication starts, and we would see here about 2 posts a month. The following month, we would see 4 posts a month. So at this point, it's every other week. At this point, it's once every week. Then it does start to ramp up until we get to the point where we might be posting almost every other day. And this is to keep things front of mind. This is to share all of the exciting things that are happening as you're in the final creative process before this thing launches. And then, of course, it continues through the run, during the run, and after close. Never forget that part of it. Again, take this with a grain of salt. The idea here is sharing early and ramping up and sharing more consistently as you get closer to the event, the launch, the release of your work. So, like I said, this might not be possible for everybody right away. What can you do when you can't do it all? Because I am totally acknowledging this is a lot. Absolutely. We want you to prioritize what has the most payoff. So if you know that your audiences are really interacting with your posts on Facebook, and that is where a lot of your audience members learn to come, then you know that spending some time on your Facebook organic posts is going to be beneficial. If you see a really big bump after you send out a postcard, then you know that you can spend your time and your money on those postcards. But on the reverse side, if you're sending out hundreds of postcards every event and you're not seeing anybody, let's say there's a discount on it, bringing in the flyer to use it as the discount when they buy their tickets, then that means that it might not be worth the time, money, and energy that you're putting into it right now. Lynette will actually be giving a lunch and learn all about this, prioritizing what has the most payoff coming up. So, little self-promotion there. But this is one way to take that really overwhelming timeline and amount of things that I just gave you to do and break it down to what is the most beneficial use of my time right now as we ramp up into a more robust marketing campaign. Show up where your audience already is, meet them where they're at, and talk to them where they already are. It kind of goes with that idea of prioritizing what has the most payoff. Make it easy for you and for them. And again, start with what you can achieve consistently. I've said this a bunch, I don't have to say it again. Once something is created, share it in all of your places. So if you created a really great video that you intended for Instagram, share it on Facebook, share it on YouTube, put it on your website, use it as the spur for a message in an email. Don't feel like you have to recreate the wheel for all of these elements of a marketing campaign that I told you about. Take them and use them in multiple places. And then finally, create a schedule, communicate that with others, and stick to it. So we are big here on plan, 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 plan. An example of this that we like to recommend to our clients and that we use ourselves is Asana. It's a task management tool that allows you to plan out, color coordinate, move, and stay flexible all around with. This is just an example of when you have created a very robust marketing plan and you have everything planned out to a T. It looks overwhelming, but then you have your checklist every day. You know what's coming, people know what's coming, and you can achieve that marketing plan that you came up with possibly 12 months ago. And finally, just one last note, flexibility is key here. Everything that we say is a recommendation. It is coming from some experience, but at the same time, you are going to know what is possible in the moment. So stay flexible and move things around the way that you need. So you never feel like you have to be super stuck in the plan that you made 12 months ago. We create the plan as a framework, and then you get to stay flexible within it and do what is best for you and your work. So, I just rambled and filled our time for sure. I'll leave this up for everybody to take in really quick. These are our next Lunch and Learn series. Like I said, Lynette is going to be talking about prioritizing your workload. Then Mel is going to work on one of our favorite free marketing tools, which is your email, which everybody should be taking advantage of the best. And then finally, following up with me in November, we will dive into the checklist for digital advertising. So going from a free marketing tool to your paid marketing tools. So feel free to go to our website and check those out, get registered, and we can all hang out during a lunch again. So I'm out of breath. I just dumped a lot of information on you. If you have any questions, please feel free to speak up. Please feel free to throw things in the chat. We would love to talk. And if you would like to eat your lunch in silence, thank you so much for spending the time to be here. And we will always be available through our website, through our email. Make sure you're following us on socials to keep in touch about all the events and information we have coming up next.
I have a question.
Please.
Can you give us some examples of like the different type of content? Just like real quick, some ideas of content that someone might create that's not overwhelming?
hmm So some of the things that we like to recommend is take stock of what you already have and think about what is already in front of you. Behind the scenes stuff is great. And we think of behind the scenes as like physically behind a camera or behind the wings of a theater, but it means whatever your process is, let people into it. So if you know you already have the headshots and the bios of artists that you're bringing in for work, make sure you're sharing those and giving them their flowers. And if you're working during the day, snap a picture with your camera of the process that you're doing. And then I think I saw a chat come in.
Nope. Just
No? Okay.
just a link to the
No,
upcoming
Okay.
workshops.
it's
Okay,
me
cool.
putting in links. It's just me.
Good. Just want to make sure I left time for that in case it was a question.
Doesn't look like anybody has any questions so far. Last chance. Oh, nope. Last chance. Anybody? All right.
Well, thank you again so much, you guys, for being here. Please stay in touch, and we'll be following up with these slides, this recording, and more information to come.
All right. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.